Oh, I was just thinking about that speech at the end of the movie. His mother was undocumented for a time. He grew up first in the Rio Grande Valley. And mom worked at a gas station. He's the first in his family to graduate from high school and to go to college. He's now at UT. He's a sophomore, and he is the American dream. And it's not to say that's it's not a naive dream. He knows the struggle in his own life. But that doesn't stop him from wanting to make those connections with people who are different than he is.
Welcome to the Lone Star Play Podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Scott Armstrong. Join me and a famous guest. We discuss their career, life, food, Texas, and everything in between. Let's get started. Episode of the Lone Star Play Podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Scott Armstrong. All right, we have another great episode today. This is just kind of like the last one we just released with Molly Ivins. This one is called Boy State. This is an Apple original film. Unbelievable. It's about the Texas, how do I describe, Texas political system, right, for high school kids, and specifically boys. All right, they all meet in Austin for a period of time and sort of build a government, vote, people into leadership roles, right? President, this, that, the other. It's quite interesting. It's captivating. You know what? These are some words that people have used online. These are the top voted tags: thought-provoking, inspirational characters, inspiring, uplifting, intelligent, unique, touching. I agree with all that. It's a phenomenal film. It is captivating, to say the least. For myself, I was engaged from the second it started to the moment it ended. You build these great relationships with the characters in the movie, and it's just a great documentary. I really, really enjoyed it. Just like the Molly Ivins one, just phenomenal documentaries. Okay, just unbelievable documentaries. This one as well, Boy State. We had the directors on as well. And the producers, they do both, right? They're pulling double duty here. They are Amanda McBain and Jesse Moss, they were phenomenal. They were so cool to talk to. We really, you have to see the movie, then listen to this podcast. Okay, I recommend that because spoilers. Okay, so if you haven't seen the movie, I definitely recommend. Unless you don't mind the spoilers, then you'll watch it. So that may be true too, if you're into that. But just so you know, there are spoilers. Again, so what I'm going to do is play the trailer for the documentary. Then we'll have a word from our sponsor from Texas Real Food, and then we'll get to the interview, guys. Okay, we'll get right to it. And the trailer's just going to give you a little more feel of what this documentary is about. So great, yeah. Again, phenomenal conversation. Truly enjoyed it. Amanda McBain, Jesse Moss from Apple Films, Boy State. Here's the trailer.
I will skip the part where I brag for 3 minutes about how great and cool I am, seeing as we are all qualified young men of skill and character. People like that stuff.
Sounds good, yeah.
People like that stuff a lot.
Some people say they're a sports junkie. I say I'm a politics junkie.
The harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph.
I'm playing this like a game. I would like very much to win. I love it, boys. I love it. Where you from?
I come from a very modest family. I'm on the course to be the first one to graduate from high school.
I'm a progressive person, and I'm in a room full of mostly conservative people.
Our masculinity shall not be infringed.
I've never seen so many white people ever. I feel like everybody has a secret underlying need for bipartisanship.
A message of unity, as good as it sounds, is not winning anyone any elections.
Primary polls are now open.
Get yourselves ready for a turbulent election.
Whatever happens, dude, best of luck.
If you win, I support you fully.
My name is Steven Garza, and I'm running for governor.
This gets applause because
As to the political views voiced in my speech, sometimes you gotta say what you gotta say in an attempt to win.
I think he's a fantastic politician. But I don't think a fantastic politician is a compliment either.
We're gonna do shock and awe. It's gonna be awesome.
I want y'all to take out your phones and go on Instagram. Everyone, come on.
Oh my God.
We show the world what patriots are made of. That when things get tough, we pull ourselves by our bootstraps. One nation, under God, lovers of the Constitution of the United States of America.
That's politics, I think. That's politics.
All right, guys, hope you enjoyed the trailer. Wow, right? Yes. Phenomenal film, like I said. So, before we get to the interview, here's a word from our sponsor, Texas Real Food. Okay. So, what I'm going to do is, I'm the word, right? I'm giving you the word. Do what I did in the last episode. So, I'm just going to jump online and we're just going to live interact with the website. So, let's do that. And then we'll get to the interview. All right. So, okay, boom, texasrealfood.com. Of course, as always, you put in your zip code, you find the nearest place around you that's serving fresh organic stuff. So whether it be a butcher, farmer's market, a restaurant, a store, something around you, right? So it's way better than Google because that just brings up everything. So it's great. It's got a directory of all kinds of great stuff. It's awesome. Okay, so boom, but they have other stuff, recipes, articles, reviews, even more information about our podcast, aside from that, but we're giving some love to everything here. So, okay, boom. Oh my gosh. Look, see, when you get on there, you're going to be blown away by the pictures, first of all, if you haven't already been on there, but you guys have to really get in here and check out some of these recipes, some of these articles, and I highly recommend it. So let's first thing here, snuggle up. Here's our top 10 films to watch over the break. Okay, right, the break of what? Winter. Over winter here. We're still in winter. That's right. So some movies. That looks really good. Oof, they just have some great recipes on here. Look, how to create an Instagram-worthy cheese and charcuterie board in 2021. Oof, that looks delicious. Ooh, make room for functional shrooms. The best stress-busting food in 2021. Okay, legal shrooms, guys. Get your head out of the gutter. Have you heard of these top 10 food trends taking over in 2021? That's what it says. That's an article. Better find out. And all these how-tos. This is what I'm talking about. Look, how to make your own venison jerky without a dehydrator. Psh, get out of here. How to can and preserve seasonal pears. Bomb. Spice up. Well, that's for Thanksgiving. You don't want that. But look, it says making your own turkey stock. I guess you can do that anytime. Everything you'll ever need to know about sourdough starter. Psh. Oof, and how to make pup pastry. Get out of here. Look, there's so much stuff, guys. Again, check it out. Texas Real Food. It's amazing. All right, look, let's get to the interview, right? That's why we're here. Boy State is the film from Apple. That's right, Apple. Your iPhone, your MacBook Pro, iPad, your Apple Watch. They got a car coming out, supposedly, right? And glasses. They're going to change the world, okay? If you don't have Apple stock, get it. Anyway, this is an Apple original film. You can find it on the app. That's how you watch it, right? So get the Apple app. If you already have it, boom, that's how you can watch it. Boy State. And again, hope you've seen it before. Spoilers before this interview. So last warning, spoilers. All right, Boy State. Our guest, Amanda McBain, Jesse Moss. Enjoy.
Where are you, Patrick?
I'm in Austin.
Okay, cool.
Austin, downtown, Southie. I'm a Southie here off of South Congress.
Yeah,
from,
great.
Where are you guys at?
We're in San Francisco. Yeah.
Nice. Love that city.
Miss Austin.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Right on. I guess, before the pandemic, right? Or have you guys traveled at all during?
I've done 2 days of production that involved air travel, but very minimal. And just otherwise in California. I went to Michigan, and I went somewhere else. LA. Is that right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So a couple of plane flights, but
sure.
Nothing.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me today. I can't tell you guys how much I absolutely was enthralled with this film. I got to be honest. This is, and I'm from Texas. I went to school in Texas, in the DFW area. I don't remember this growing up. I'm sure it happened in my school. I'm sure it was something that people participated in and whatever. And it's just right off the bat, this is where I'll jump in is that, I just wasn't a very political person, right? At that age. I don't really even remember kids around me being very, to that extent, political. And I watched this film and I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is like, it started off, I thought this might get Lord of the Flies because I didn't know where it was going to go, right? Just like, oh my, these kids just have free reign to do whatever they want. Let's see what happens. But yeah, it's just absolutely enthralling, taking place here in my home state. And I was fascinated the most by Mr. Garza. I'm not going to lie. My mom's from Mexico as well. She immigrated here too. So I'm not going to lie. Like his story really struck me, like it really stuck to me and I could relate to it a lot. And it was just phenomenal. It's just a phenomenal film. And, I'm curious, why this film? What led y'all to that? Like, this is what we're going to do. I'm sure it's, let's just start there.
Well, I didn't know about the program growing up either. Actually, I grew up in a pretty political family. My parents were old lefties, but for whatever reason, it just wasn't something people in my community participated in. And it was really a discovery for the both of us when we learned how prevalent the program is. And I think in a way, how vital it is. We read about it in 2017, because the boys in Texas, maybe from watching the film, they voted to secede from the Union. Yeah. And that decision was controversial, got some press locally, and then became a national news story for like a millisecond. And we read a piece about it in the Washington Post, and we thought, well, this program is still very much around. And it's really interesting because it brings these young people together with very different politics. And that's a pretty unusual space in America today, where you have people coming together face to face who don't necessarily come from the same place, share the same politics. We thought that would be a really interesting way to kind of take the temperature of our country politically.
Absolutely. I also think like, it definitely, it was just such a weird experience watching this film because it's almost transported me back to high school. And I started to even feel those same insecurities I used to have. I started to feel, relate to some of the things that kids are going through. And it made me also think, man, how much of it is what they actually believe and how much of it is just influenced by the energy that's around them and just trying to get a laugh, if you will, or right. Like, I guess it's just hard to discern. Do they actually believe these things?
That is a great question. And I think there's two answers really, which is one, we never made a film about this age group is pretty interesting for exactly those reasons, right? We all went through it at some point. You're kind of in a shape-shifting part of your life. I mean, we always keep growing, but there's this particular period of 17 to 19 when you're really about to leave your house, and who you are as a political person is also a question we had in our minds. Like, when do you develop your politics and why? And where? I mean, it's not always directly related to it's not, something you're gifted as like a gene. So I think that this age group also very interesting because you definitely heard a lot of kids who were parroting surely what they heard from at home or what they'd seen on whatever media diet they were on. And what was so important to us is to find 4 kids who we really felt had a kind of formidable understanding, not only of how government works, and all of them, the 4 people we follow, have very intense passion, the sort of like knowledge of history too. But they really kind of thought for themselves. I mean, I think one of the first things Ben, as much as a 17-year-old does, these guys all really did have a kind of strength to their beliefs that was pretty interesting to me, at the same time that they had this kind of openness to change. And so
Yeah.
that kind of strange balance is what we needed in our main characters. And that's what we found in all different ways with the four of them. But for sure, I think high school is an interesting time for everybody and a hard time for everybody. And also kind of maybe one of the reasons we really wanted to be there. They're sort of vulnerable in a way that's pretty interesting.
Absolutely. Because I think if you get them alone, you're going to have a different conversation than when they're in a group, and they're you mentioned that their openness to change things. You're right. And I'll be honest, like when I start watching it, Robert, the longer haired kid that's in the movie, at the beginning, I'm thinking, okay, he's going to be the villain of this in a sense, not to use such a aggressive term, but, just in those sort of, theatrical terms. Right. So, because he comes across as just leaning into the energy, leaning into what's happening, wanting to put a mirror up to what he sees as the surface topics, right? What they think he will be accepted. And him thinking about it too much and him coming up with this strategy backfires on him. And he reflects upon it and he sees that. And he you know what? I wrote down this quote that he said, because this really stuck to me. And, it's amazing what you can learn from somebody, no matter what their age. But he said, you don't get elected on minority issues in a democracy. I think he said that was him. Yeah, it was him. And I thought that honesty was so wonderful that he would admit that, because you're also at an age where you do say these things. You still are open about these thoughts and not keeping them in a sense. And yeah, I thought that was just very interesting that he would say that, because in a way he's right, and that's a weird thing, right? Because then you're stuck not pushing for other things you might want to push for. I just found that particularly interesting.
I think all of these guys surprised us. They also surprised themselves. I think Robert, we don't necessarily think when we meet him that he's capable of self-reflection or growth.
Yeah.
And he's one of the biggest surprises in the movie, that confession, which we didn't know he was carrying this secret, that he was not being truthful about his politics. I think he articulates a struggle too that we see reflected in national politics. Do these people really believe what they say? Are they just pandering to the electorate to get elected? And to watch each of these four boys individually confront these moral questions in the form of politics is, I think, what made the journey for us so revelatory. And because we do care about all of them. We don't agree with all of their politics. We're pretty progressive. We identify deeply with Stephen, and I think he's kind of the heart and soul of the film.
100%.
We were bound so tightly to him in this journey. But we really like them all. Ben, too, who's kind of the villain and is a Reagan supporter.
Yeah, he was great he was great in the film. Just as a character in a film.
I think that, you mentioned the teenage aspect of this film. And I think that we were excited about making a coming of age movie that's a coming of age political film in Texas in this moment. And we had been told that Boys State was a kind of crucible for transformation. And we thought, that's bullshit. It can't possibly, it's just a summer camp. But actually, the intensity of it, the commitment that it requires, the risk taking, I think you see kind of forces real change, not for all of them, but it really is a coming of age film.
Yeah. Do you think, having the cameras following them around, do you think that had an impact on them? Do you think they would have had the same experience at Boys State?
It's such a good question. It's kind of one of the great questions of
I guess it's hard to know, right?
We do. And it's hard to know because obviously there's no scenario where our cameras weren't there.
Sure.
And like the kids stay and, they don't know the reality of that event without cameras. But, we're not fly size. We're not fly on the wall. We're like very big, and there's 8 of us. You know, there was a lot of camera units. There was 1,100 people, as you said, in the kind of a Lord of the Flies maelstrom scenario, and we were part of that chaos on some level. And we've been doing this a long time, so we can sort of choreograph ourselves sort of in and out of spaces without, you know, messing things up too much. But, you know, Stephen has a good answer for this. He's like, you know, even with a camera on me, I had a very hard time getting my signatures that I needed to be on the ballot, you know? And so I would say my answer is always like, yeah, our camera pointing at him probably gave him an extra little oomph of confidence, because this is a kid who didn't, you know, kind of get that kind of attention maybe before us. But the fact is, our camera didn't create his ability to give a speech the way he and only he can give a speech. I mean, it's really an extraordinary gift that he has that we were fortunately there to capture, that, you know, he'll continue to use hopefully in his life. But that's what you really hope for when you do this kind of work, is that you kind of luck out on some level that these people have, that you're there for those moments.
Yeah, that they shine through in some way. No, totally get it. Yeah, no, Stephen had me, I mean, crying a couple times for sure. You know, just without a doubt, I just felt it was just emotional. It was emotional for me to see him go through that. And, you know, I don't want to spoil anything for people that haven't seen it. But yes, you know, I'm also curious how you choose those particular, you know, people to run this. And did you have other people that you shot that didn't make it in the film?
We had a couple of folks we met in advance who kind of just didn't work out. Their ambitions sputtered, and you know, we were really interested in people who were going to run for governor and who were competitive. And we went all in on Stephen and Robert and Ben, and we got lucky that they did phenomenally well. We also have some instincts that are honed from 2 decades of documentary work. And, you know, it's not a formula, it's not science. It's kind of trusting your heart. And you get to meet people and talk to them. And, you know, it was pretty apparent to us that Stephen, even if he didn't immediately present as a natural politician, because he was kind of quiet, he just had a confidence and, I don't know, a kind of X factor that you thought maybe, just maybe, this kid could do something special. Of course, because he's progressive, we thought he's going into this sea of predominantly white conservative Texans. They're not going to take to him. I think that was one of the great surprises, both for him and for Renee, is that these kids who come from very different backgrounds than most of these other kids, these young men of color, of progressive politics, actually find their own voice and also find a way to summon the better angels of this electorate and to build those bridges that I think we're all looking for today in American life. And that's watching those bridges get built. And it's not easy. And sometimes those bridges collapse, is a really, I think, is a fascinating process to watch, because I think we need to be reminded that it's possible, and we need to see people who can do it. And we need to see it done well. And sometimes we need to see it fail too. And I think that's what we got to see. Yeah.
Wow. That's, you brought up Renee, phenomenal, you know, person in the film, also gave some wonderful speeches as well. And, you know, the backlash that started to come from like the impeachment and, you know, it was just, he handled it beautifully, in my opinion. And I thought it was interesting, the insight that he had at the end as well. He's a smart guy, because the insight he had at the end of, you know, well, just that question that he posed, right, of, you know, should I have done some of these things that they did to me, right, to win this? And I wonder, in retrospect, if he would do it again, if he would do that. I'm curious. Did that conversation go any further behind the scenes with y'all?
don't think we've actually asked him that question. I feel like, all of their takeaways, as different as they are as humans, their takeaways from their Boy State experience were also varied. And, for Renee, I think that he's come out of this, I think, feeling like electoral politics is not for him. So I'm not sure he would do it again, really. I think he understands his power, his superpowers, of which there are many, can be put to better use in community activism. And that's what he's doing right now. And he believes that's his service to the country and where he can be powerful. And I think that's right. And Stephen, meanwhile, doubled down on electoral politics and believes, and I do believe that his superpowers are good for that space too. He's just sort of naturally kind of returns to a kind of hope is where his sort of center of gravity is. And that does, even as much as he may or may not, get worked by the system and like fail and right. He just has that capacity for standing back up, and that's what he wants to do with his life, So, and Robert, on the flip side, I think came into this program incredibly cynical about politics, having aged in the Senate and watched all these folks from in the adult state really go at each other and not get anything done on the deeply existential, on the crises that exist because they're so wrapped up in their partisanship. I think he came in with all of that baggage, and then he left with this real renewal, this reminder, because of people like Stephen and Renee, that politics at its best can bring out the best in people and unite people. And I think for him then to go out and go to West Point and have that be his future for the foreseeable bunch of years, it's very exciting, to just see all these different ways that the program can really be effective in that learn by doing space they create. And then there's Ben, who's, I think, well, you can talk about Ben. I think that's the most kind of interesting.
He's interesting for sure. That guy is very interesting.
Yeah, he's not, unlike the other three, he doesn't really change in the experience. He sort of comes in as a master strategist, the Karl Rove of boys.
Yeah.
We see he plays politics like a professional, and he's good at it. Very smart kid, really confident, really interesting personal story, which you learn about in the movie. And of course, he's Renee's opponent. But Ben,
nemesis.
That's right. Ben is, he's also a patriot though. And I think he's had a chance now. It's been 2 years since we went to Boy State with him, and he's been able to see the film and to meet Stephen and meet Renee and get to know them as people. And I said, he's had a chance to reflect on his own actions, which has forced a kind of moral reckoning with the dirty tricks that he was a practitioner of in order to win. And he sees in his own actions the national consequences of a corrosive politics that's based on personal attack. And where it leaves us is a kind of malnourished place. And he wants to see our country be healthy. And so I think he's disavowed his dirty tricks. Wow. And that's been really welcoming to see.
Absolutely. That's phenomenal. That's great. That's great. That's great. That's what we want, right? And people that's right. We want people to
be
see
capable
what
of
they've
moral
done.
growth.
Yeah,
I think,
absolutely.
And I think maybe we all need to think about, we can't all go back to being 17 and go to boy state or girl state. But we get so fixed in our identities as we get older and, siloed. And I just think, Renee talks about, as a liberal, this is something that he needs to sort of hear from and confront people whose politics are different than his own. And I think, and face to face in particular, where it's harder you can't just turn people off, right? And how do we all, for us as filmmakers, it was really important to go to a different place, to go to Texas, to go to a predominantly conservative community, and to really listen. That's what we do as filmmakers mostly, is listen. And I think it certainly gave us some insight. So I think we all recognize that we have we are left with a deep and potentially intractable division. And how do we heal that division?
Yeah, absolutely. Is there, you mentioned Girl State, is there a potential sequel that could happen here? I mean, it seems obvious, right? I'm sure you get asked that a lot.
We're doing it.
Nice.
It won't be in Texas, most likely, but for sure, we can't wait to get into that space. I mean, and eventually maybe even do a People State when the program, when and if, more like when they merge. So that would be also interesting.
Absolutely. It's totally fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, it was really interesting for us to take the temperature of young men in this moment. And I think that's what the Boy State window provided, as you see it in the film, sort of two competing ideas of the way to be a man. You see in Stephen a kind of...
that's a great way to put that.
You see a masculinity of empathy and compassion, of listening. And that's a kind of modern manhood. And you see in Ben's version of it, embodied in his politics, it's much more militant. It's one of kind of conflict. And he talks about military metaphors when he talks about shock and awe, and combined arms warfare is the way he engages in this process. And I think so the film becomes a clash of male identity, and that is the clash that we're experiencing in our country. We saw it in the Biden and Trump conflict too. And I think just as much we're interested in for young women, this is a really interesting moment and I think a Girl State could also, I think, yield insight into, the ways that young women are growing up in America today, and
sure, 100%.
How that manifests in their political identities.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course. Is it done in all 50 states?
It's all 50 states, except I think at some point Hawaii was not part of the mix, but
okay.
Now it's not clear.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But Texas,
Incredible.
I've got to say, Texas as a space, we were very excited about not only learning about the program, but we were very excited about going to Texas because, as we all know, Texas is a complicated place politically and really vivid. And, that was exactly where we wanted to first visit, just in all of its layers of rural, urban, red, blue, purple. And it's big. The program in Texas is quite large. It's probably one of the biggest in the country. So for that reason, we were interested in how democracy works when you get a little bigger too, because that complicates things.
I think you see, Texas is a politically, racially very diverse state, more so every day. The program, though, it's still a little bit old-fashioned, and it feels a little bit like the U.S. Senate, and it's disproportionately white, disproportionately conservative, and rural. And I think it troubled us that it doesn't feel reflective of modern Texas. On the other hand, it does mirror the kind of unequal political structure that we're living with. And the narrative of Boy State, the movie, is about people who've been disenfranchised or denied power, trying to fight for and gain power in this system. And I think in that way, the movie becomes a metaphor for our national political moment. And Stephen and Renee coming to power, finding strategies to fight, to hold on to their principles, but also be open to a process. And you mentioned, the attacks on Renee. We see in the film both kind of overt and covert racism, much like Obama was delegitimized by people like Donald Trump and
the birther thing. Exactly.
You see the challenge to Renee, who comes to power so quickly and impressively as the head of the Nationalist Party, is instantly challenged and threatened with impeachment. And the way he fends off those attacks is really wonderful to see. But I think you can read into that a kind of covert racism that then surfaces.
Especially the Instagram post.
That's right. It becomes, that's overt, right? I mean, that was really shocking to see. And
that was overt. You're right.
I don't think for Renee to see that, but for us to be witness to that was really quite shocking, but it's there. We just lived through this 2020 election and I think we saw very naked appeals to division, to racism. Unfortunately, that's what our country is grappling with. So I think Boys State, people sometimes wish for maybe a rosier picture. I think the film has real optimism. The story has real optimism.
I think so, 100%.
It's also really honest with, I think, what we're reckoning with. There's a racial reckoning in this country, and this film deals with that.
Absolutely. Look, Stephen doesn't, gosh, I'm torn to talk about the ending here, or should we just do that? I don't even
let's do
spoil it. Yeah. Spoil. Okay. You've seen it. If not, pause it, watch the damn movie, on Apple Plus. It's phenomenal. I mean, you got to watch. I do want to talk about this because, he doesn't win at the end, but it still feels super hopeful at the end. And that's how I felt. And again, I'm crying with him at the end. I'm crying with him. I'm not like how he lost. It almost didn't matter. It's like the lessons he learned and everything was so much more important, and how he came out and everyone coming up to him. I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud. I mean, that just was like the world. I could just feel that through him, and it was very powerful. So yeah, I think it absolutely has that optimism and hope through it, which is great.
That's where a person starts, right? I mean, he's got that city who are the immediate, that's his immediate circle at Boys State. And those are the folks that are hugging him at the end. They are very different from him, but that connection that they made, which is really like the beginning of how you start to build this whole thing out. And he will, in his lifetime, continue to do that, continue to meet people and continue to be himself and just grow his community. So that big hug is bigger and bigger and bigger.
That's awesome.
But to see that already, you just knew with this particular person who, again, has these superpowers that I don't know where those come from, but and his hope is not a naive hope. I mean, he's been through the ringer many times in his life. So, that kind of person who puts together those two things, seeing things for what they are clearly and still having this love of the American promise is really, really gorgeous. And I feel very privileged that we met him so early in his journey.
He quotes Napoleon, which I love. He says,
"Yes, I found that odd, but at the same time, like,
who doesn't quote Napoleon in everyday conversation?" He says that you become strong by defying defeat, and
and turning loss into failure,
turning loss into failure,
and failure into success.
Sorry.
Yeah, and I think that we all recognize that justice, fairness, equality is a struggle. And as much as we wanted the happy ending, we know that it's really about living to fight another day. And we see that in the film. I mean, Stephen goes from Boys State to speaking at the Democratic Convention in Texas. And like, he's already commands the stage at the age of 17. And he's, I think we started the conversation talking about like, why didn't we go to Boys State or Girls State when we were growing up? And I think, maybe it's this generation now is so much more politicized at a younger age than we were, because they're confronting threats, whether it's gun violence in schools or climate change, that I think we're not present. And so we see that. We have a teenage daughter who's like much more political at the age of 14 than we ever were. And these guys like Stephen, they're already out there working on campaigns. He in high school, he would like not do his homework. He'd rather go work on a political campaign. He was like sorry that his grades weren't better. I said, you know what? I mean, what you're doing that's your education. That's amazing. So they're not wasting any time, any of them. And we see young people march for our lives, leading political movements. They can't, as Stephen says in the movie, let's show the adults that the kids are all right. And I think they know that we're not going to fix their problems. We fucked things up pretty badly, and they're going to have to show us the way forward. And I think Stephen helps us see what that would be.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's such an interesting thing, right? When you're a kid, because you're like, oh, the adults, right? They're not doing it right. But then you become the adult, and then you turn around, and now there's another kid looking at you going, you're not doing it right, right? It's this weird circle, I guess. So I'm curious if they're aware of that, or maybe it's different this time, or I don't know. Right? I guess everybody thinks it's different that time. I guess the hope is that they retain, right? That's what that childlike innocence and hope, right? That the world can be better and we can make a change. And because with time, right, it does just, life sort of can make you very, pessimistic about things. And I do hope that this new generation, more connected, more politicized, more, understanding of the issues, doesn't make the same mistake that I feel like my generation made.
I think there is, within ourselves and within our country, clearly a contest of optimism versus cynicism, and we see that embodied in Robert. The sort of the warring ideologies, in one person, which is so interesting. And I think that it's so easy to dwell on the cynical and the division. But there's power in optimism, and I think
100%.
Yeah, that's what Stephen is reminds us of.
100%. I mean, he does for sure.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just thinking about that speech at the end of the movie. His mother was documented for a time. He grew up first in the Rio Grande Valley. Mom worked at a gas station. He's the first in his family to graduate from high school and to go to college. He's now at UT. He's a sophomore, and he is the American dream, And it's not to say that's like it's not a naive dream. He knows the struggle in his own life, but that doesn't stop him from wanting to make those connections with people who are different than he is, and to find common ground and not. To look for that connection.
Absolutely. I mean, these are the people that are coming to our country. These are the people that some people want to get out, right? It's so crazy to me. Just so crazy to me. Something I noticed from the film, well, didn't notice, I guess I'll say, is there was no really mention of Trump and politics and the adult part of it. Was that, I guess it had to have been on purpose, right? Or was that hard to cut around? Did the kids talk about that a lot? And I'm curious how that all worked out.
I think one of the big ideas behind the program is really they say, this is your boy's state. And in that sense, they really want the kids to form their own government separate from the real world, right? And so, of course, people bring in their own politics, and obviously that informs how they act to some degree while they're there. But they form these two sort of value agnostic parties, and from scratch build them with platforms and elect leaders and everything else. But I think for us then, so what I mean by that is that even at the program, I didn't hear Trump this, Trump that all the time. So it's not like we were avoiding shooting that. It just really was less of part of the conversation than you would think, given how much media comes at us about that guy. But then also in our edit, which by the way took a very long time. These kind of
I can't even imagine.
It took us a year to write this movie, and I just that's kind of true with the kind of films we make, cinema verite, but this one in particular, just because it was a complicated. Yes, we knew the beginning, middle, and end of who's going to win the governor race, but also there was these 2 state parties to build in, and all 4 characters and 1,000 supporting characters and everything else. But the choice for us was also, yes, everything in this film is going to be a microcosm for the macrocosm. There, you can't not relate our own emotions and understanding what's happening in Trump America, in the politics in Washington, to what we're seeing play out here, because it does trickle down and infuse the behavior of all these 17-year-olds. They're modeling to some degree what they see in the adult world, of course. But it also offered kind of a sideways approach to thinking about all these big questions of representational democracy, electoral politics, the rights and wrongs of how you run a campaign. that didn't talk about Trump. And that for us is exactly where we want to be. We wanted to, we as filmmakers, as people, were trying to make sense of, all these, as Jesse mentioned, like trying to get a sense of the health of our democracy, but like not talking directly about Trump. And that's very hard because really he is like one drop of ink into, it will like stain a whole pool. Like he's just that, he just sort of infects everything. And I think so it was really interesting. There is only one time his name is mentioned. That's at the end of the film when Ben, since we're talking spoilers, when Ben says, I took a page from the Trump playbook, right? And that's kind of all you need. I mean, you kind of know he's everywhere, right? On some level.
That's interesting. Yeah. Without actually his name being mentioned or whatever, the influence is there of what's happening. That's interesting. I wonder if Ben, and that's interesting because he's such a fan of Reagan, which I loved. He reminded me of Alex P. Keaton.
Yeah.
From Family Ties.
Totally.
That's what I imagine.
We just did a Zoom call with him last week, and he was making the case for why George W. Bush was due for a historical reappraisal and was on par with Harry Truman as a great 21st century president. And so
he's got it all worked out. He might even convince you.
He might even convince you. I love that.
He's still got the Reagan doll, but he's I think as he goes to SMU and George W.'s got a relationship there. He's got a soft spot for George
W. doll.
That's yeah. God, that's crazy. Well, yeah, I found that interesting that he was such a Reagan fan, and then here he is pulling tactics from the Trump team.
Yeah.
In a sense, instead of pulling tactics from the Reagan era or something else, right? Like, because the modern era rules all, in a sense, even though you're still aware of history and you're still aware of things that have happened, you just can't help that influence that's around you. And another thing about him that I found interesting is at the beginning of the film, he says, I'm not really into like, hoo rowdy, right? Like into that sort of, and then by the end of the film, I felt like that was all him. He was more into that. Not necessarily him, whatever, but you see him get up and confront Renee's decision about cutting off the speaker, right? Or the speech that the other guy had before. So he gets up and confronts the crowd, right? And it just has these moments I just didn't expect from him, just based off of how he was in the beginning. And I think that like that energy, or what do you think it was? Like, right, the energy, the feeling from the boys, I think, right? The energy from the boys and sort of the chanting and stuff, it gets to you no matter who you are. Even if you say, I can't be affected by that, or that's not me, it ends up becoming that way.
Yeah. I mean, the speech he gives at the end there, I find one of the most extraordinary things I've ever seen, because that's extemporaneous. Like that's all words just coming out of, I mean, I can't even believe that's not scripted. It's just,
yeah, you're right.
Extraordinary, like right there at spur of the moment, those words just came out of his mouth. I mean, that is a gift as well. And I think he, over time, the confidence building for someone like him who goes to a very small school, everything else, like he's made for that stage on some level, and found power in that stage, and the power, sort of unlocked even more of his brilliance, really. I mean, he really is he's extremely charismatic. Actually, as a human, we knew that right away. But that ability to just off the cuff give something that well sculpted in a debate like that is amazing.
Ben is a double amputee, and he addresses this early in the film. And so there is kind of within him a vulnerability that he's grown up with this disability, but he's a very confident, headstrong person, and he sort of really believes in self-reliance. That's the Reaganism in him, and he articulates that too in the beginning.
Yeah.
But and I think Ben's only gets a quarter of the screen time in this movie because we got 4 great characters. But I think there was really kind of a depth and complexity to Ben. And we talked about some of his kind of aggressive tactics. And I think if I think a deeper, Ben is, I think, and probably he himself would participate in a kind of deeper reckoning with his own psychology and how he practices politics and how that is rooted in his own identity as a person. I mean, that's how we all practice our politics, right? That's where it comes from if you stand for anything, right? If you're not just kind of picking a bunch of things like we see Robert do in order to get elected. And of course that comes with its own reckoning. But in a sense, Ben's aggression, you might say, is a kind of, flip side to, or sort of related in some way to his own identity, part of his identity. And so that's really interesting to think about. I think
they're all fearless on some level too. I will say that about all of them. And then what happens because they're so different in their backgrounds and their politics and their interests, but also so on the same level in terms of A, being open to talking to one another, and B, being as smart as each other. I mean, at Sundance, Renee and Ben, who are so equally matched but so different, would have these epic debates about, you name the topic, race in America, Israel, Palestinian conflict, 3-hour kind of heated. Wow. I would just get my phone and I'm like, I'm just going to keep filming. This could go on forever with these guys. And that, the value of that, I think, was also for me, not just we needed this quartet, this group of voices who so represent different things. I think that Ben was such a needed part of that.
Yeah, 100%. Another thing about Ben too, that the one comment I thought was hilarious is when he says to the crowd, I don't know, shush or shut up or something, and they all quiet down. He's like, oh yeah, I like that. He loved that power. I found that cracked me up when he said that, but also got me thinking, right? Because it makes you think, well, what does that mean exactly, right? So he's searching for this power. He likes that ability. And I also found I don't think he doesn't want to be the spotlight. He wants to have control over who gets the spotlight, right? And I think he knows that if you're in that position, you don't actually have any control or power. Someone's controlling you in that power, and he wants to be that guy. And maybe I'm overthinking it, but he's such a smart guy. I bet he thinks about those things.
That's right. He's the hand of the king, and Eddie is his king. Eddie's the gubernatorial candidate, of course, for the Federalist Party. And Ben talks about the relationship in a funny way. He says, Eddie knows his facts, or at least he presents like he knows his facts.
Yeah.
But the truth is, Eddie's actually a really smart guy and very confident. But they made a powerful team. But I think Ben actually has the dual ability to kind of command a room and to be the master strategist. And I think that's the brilliance you see, is that he can hush a room of 500 unruly 17-year-old Texas boys, and he can also kind of improvise a brilliant strategy to get his candidate elected. So I think that Ben actually he's like a double threat. I think that he may be, if it weren't for a failure of strategy, perhaps he could have been a successful gubernatorial candidate. He was sort of too principled. For a guy we're talking about as maybe having not any principles at the end of the week, he starts with these principles that he's not going to campaign for governor because the party doesn't stand for anything yet, and for him to campaign would be somehow dishonest. So it's a really interesting kind of journey that he makes. But I think right. This is such a performative space. Electoral politics is performative, and I think that there's obviously the whole part of governing that's not performative. It's just about getting the job done and doing it well. But I think that because it's a performative space, it's a kind of stage set that you really get to see people try on these identities. And I think that what sort of allows it to be such an interesting, I don't know, a space to explore both teenage identity and political identity. It is a sort of they can kind of try things on in the room, and we chose kids who were willing to do that. on stage, literally at Boys State.
That's awesome. No, all the kids were phenomenal. All the boys were great. Nothing but respect for them. For that's a tough thing to do on its own, right? To say, okay, follow me around with these cameras and let's do this, and that's a lot to take on as those kids too, and to be in that environment, right? You're susceptible to all that. That's just a lot to go through, and I think they all handled it, wonderfully. To be honest with you, and you guys really captured everything and brought together this wonderful film. I mean, I was literally hanging on to every second of that movie. I'm not going to lie. I didn't even want to step away I didn't even want to pause it because I didn't want to lose that energy. It's like, you pause a minute, you come back. Sometimes I never come back to it. If I pause something, I'll just never come back, it'll be forever gone. So yeah, I just was like, man, it's just such a great film. Really, really pulled me in. I learned so much about this. We always talk about food on the podcast a little bit. I'm curious what the food was like during all that. Was that mayhem?
That's that's the UT cafeteria serving up 1,100 meals for these ravenous boys. There's that wonderful montage in the movie. I think it's breakfast, and you see like a guy eating a hot dog and relish, and it's kind of I can't say much for the cuisine, but it got them fed and got them marching. We had a great. I'm reminded of the amazing pre-production meal we had. We got the whole crew together. We went to what's that famous barbecue spot that's outside of
Franklin's?
Town?
No.
Salt Lick?
Salt Lick. Yeah. So maybe, that was just we needed to kind of baptize our production by going to an out-of-town barbecue meal.
Our whole crew was staying on in the dorms along with the.
Oh, really?
So we had the option of eating in the cafeterias, and I have to say, not like some of the crew did that, but but we also had stuff available in our kind of war room, the good old film set bagels and cream cheese kind of thing. But one thing that is not in the film, I mean, there's so many things that were on the edit room floor because they're great, but they don't fit. But one detail is that was it the legislature or somebody got Whataburger designated oh God, I wish I could remember.
The official meal or the official food of Texas or something.
Basically, yeah. They passed that law through the Senate and the Congress. And then they got a call from Whataburger. So from the CEO who was super fired up and sent them, I think some,
It worked.
Yeah, it worked.
It worked.
I mean, when I think about meals for us, not really a meal, but we had all these crews running around, really cinematographers, because they weren't really big crews. They were just 7 cinematographers, and they were all kind of attached to a character. And at the end of an 18-hour day, we would have a half an hour at midnight to gather and decompress, and we would sit outside where it was beautiful. That temperature dropped. We would drink beer and just guzzle a bag of chips, and that was to me a production meal. Was beer and chips and what happened with Ben, what happened with Steve, and what happened with Robert.
Probably not okay that we're drinking beer on campus.
It's probably anyway. Okay, but we were in the adult dorm. So
the adult dorm.
Trust me, those beer happening at the dorms. I mean, let's be real.
Teenage boy eating habits. You go to their room and Stephen would have a 2-liter bottle of Mountain Dew and a box of Fruit Loops, and he'd be pouring it. It's two fisting it with a box of cereal and you're just dude, that cannot be
healthy.
But thank God you're 17.
I mean, they're sleeping 2 hours a night and eating junk food. I don't understand. There's definitely a different.
That's what
life.
Your life, you could do that when you were that age. You could just get by with, it's not, it wasn't important to you, right? It wasn't it was just get something in and, we got this other stuff to do. Well, that's interesting. That is hilarious to hear. Well, is there anything that we didn't discuss about the film? I mean, I'll definitely we're going to end with where to watch it and how to connect with you guys and all that sort of thing. But is there any specific part about the film or anything we didn't mention or anything you want to end on? Let people know about it that I didn't talk about.
I don't think so. I mean, thank you.
It's great to have great to reach out to Austin, and we someday we want to bring the movie and show it. We had big plans to we premiered at Sundance, but we were going to go to South by Southwest and have a Texas premiere there. And someday we'll bring it back there and get all the boys. And we look forward to that. In the meantime, you can watch it on Apple TV Plus. And we're doing a lot of conversations with the boys too. So if people are interested in that, they should follow us on Twitter, Boy State Movie, or Instagram, and just kind of then the boys are all active on social media. They're not all of them, but Steven, Renee, and
I'm going to see if I can get, I want to get Steven on 100%.
He's great.
To be frank with you, I would love to have him on and talk about his journey and I just think we would have a lot in common and could really have a great conversation.
I hope you guys do connect. Yeah, that'd be cool.
We're definitely going to try. He inspired me. I mean, he really, everybody, you know what? All of the boys did really in the film. I will say that. They all really did. So, well, listen, again, this was absolutely wonderful. Again, I thoroughly enjoyed the film. I'm blessed at this job. I get to do so many great things and take in so many great content. I got to watch 2 great documentaries this week. I watched the one with Molly Ivins, The Raise Hell. I don't know if y'all have seen that. I was telling Maria about it. It's on Hulu. Talk about politics, right? This phenomenal woman, Texas liberal woman, just a great documentary as well. But yes, Boy State, just phenomenal. Great job, guys. I can't wait for Girl State and for all the other ones that could come out of that. I honestly am very curious what the Girl State would look like. I just feel like it would be a better run. It might not be as well of a movie, because it might just be, not as much drama. I don't know.
We'll find out.
We will find out. I think the whole joy of what we do is to have our expectations subverted a little bit. So we'll see what we find.
Totally. I get that. Well, again, thank y'all so much. I really appreciate it. My best to you all during this time. Nothing but, wish you guys nothing but safety and everything for your family during all this. So, especially during the holidays. So thank y'all again very much.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick.
Absolutely.
The Lone Star Plate podcast is produced by Texas Real Food. Go to texasrealfood.com and you can search your city for stores, butchers, restaurants, farmers markets, and more who are using fresh, artisanal, organic sources. It's a fun site that brings all natural options all together. I hope you enjoyed this episode. For more information, go to thelonestarplate.com. I'm your host, Patrick Scott Armstrong. Until next time.